excited to show for class? Great. Today, students, our journey through Music and Makeup Sunday, we will be learning about a legend, a man of the arts, an artiste, if you will, an actor, a singer, a performer. Today, we will be learning about David Bowie. Okay, so let's dive right into it. I have no idea how I'm going to do this look. I was requested this by my cousin, so we shall see. I'm very nervous about this look because I don't even have the correct tools that I need to be able to do this look. Probably should have gone to the store and got these things, but we're just gonna wing it. Let's go. So David Bowie wasn't always David Bowie. David reinvented himself as David Bowie, but David Robert Jones was born on January 8th, 1947 in Brixton, London to unwed parents, which is actually very abnormal for the 40s. And his parents also had children from other marriages. So for them to be unwed and had children from other marriages, as well as having a child out of wedlock, was very out of the norm. His parents didn't actually wed until David was 8 months old. David's mother worked as an usherette at a movie theater, while his father worked as a promotions officer at an orphanage. David's father's first wife was a singer, and he tried to make her famous, but unfortunately it didn't work out. So David's father did have a little bit of previous experience with show business and that world in general. In 1955, the family settled in Sundridge Park, where Bowie attended Burnt Ash Junior School. Bowie was in the choir and demonstrated above average abilities in playing the recorder, which I don't know if y'all remember playing the recorder, you know, I can't whistle, but that really annoying instrument that everybody had to learn back in the day. Remember that thing? It was really annoying. At the age of 9, David's teachers said that his dancing was vividly imaginative and extremely artistic for such a young child. The same year, David's father would bring home records by Elvis Presley, Fat Domino, The Teenagers, The Platters, and Little Richard. Later in life, David would describe Tutti Frutti by Little Richard as quote-unquote hearing God. David spoke about Little Richard later in life, stating, quote, "I wanted to be a white Little Richard, or at least a sax player at the age of 8, end quote. By the end of that year, Bowie had taken up ukulele and chest bass. For those of you who don't know what it is, I promise you're not an idiot, or I didn't know what that was either. I don't know, maybe we're all idiots, we'll be idiots together, but it's an instrument made of a pole, traditionally like a broomstick, placed alongside a chest, and you put strings on it and you pluck at it. I don't know, I'll put like an image here of it. Like people made it at home and stuff too, but he learned how to play this. He also learned how to play the saxophone and the piano, so Lil David was very talented in the music at a very young age. At the age of 13, David's older half-brother introduced him to jazz and rock music, which influenced him later in life as well. Terry was David's best friend, protector, and David looked up to Terry. Terry also helped David cope with the family secrets of mental illness. You see, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and sometimes even today, people don't talk about mental illness because it's not as accepted. And the family had a long line of schizophrenic family members. Some were institutionalized and some committed suicide. Bowie spoke on the family's mental health concerns later in life, stating, quote, "I think I'm not so sure it's so much as madness, but I think there's an awful lot of emotional and spiritual mutilation that goes on in my family." End quote. Like I said, because it was a different time, the family didn't speak about this mental illness. This is not working. I'm going to have to redo this all over again, you guys. I'm sorry. Today's lesson starts with sometimes things just don't work out and you have to start over, and that's okay. That's what we're doing right now. Okay, so I literally could not do my makeup using what I had, and my happy ass had to go all the way down to Spirit Halloween one town over to get what I needed. That is love, my friends. That's love. I love you guys. And back to Terry and David. Okay, so That was really dramatic. Anyways, Terry took David to London for the first time, showing him what life could be like outside of the little suburban world that he was once living in. Ooh, yes, girl. This is what I needed. So, although David was very different in many ways, he was a typical teenager when it came to the opposite sex and chasing women. At the age of 13, I think, him and his best friend got into a fight over a girl named Carol because they both had a crush on her. Damn Carol, starting all this drama between these two friends, I tell you. The two boys get into a fight where his best friend hit him in the left eye and left permanent damage. His left pupil was left permanently dilated, which he actually thanked his best friend for, stating that it made him look more interesting. And although it did make him look more interesting, being out of school for 3 months led David to feel even more like an outcast and more like an outsider than he already did. So instead of feeling extremely lonely and isolated, David decided he was going to throw himself into his music. And in 1962, the Beatles were all the rage. So fame was coming out of Britain like crazy. David was determined to be the next star. With the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, he wanted to make sure Davy Jones was known. Remember, he's Davy Jones still. So David decided that he was going to pull a little publicity stunt to make sure that him and his band, the Manish Boys, would get some gigs. He went on live TV, starting the Rebellion of the Long-Haired Boys, which was a prevention of cruelty of men with long hair. At the age of 17, he stated, quote, "I think we're all fairly tolerant, but for the last 2 years, we've heard comments like, 'Darling,' and 'Can I carry your handbag?' thrown at us, and I think it just to stop now," end quote. So you guys, guess what? This publicity stunt, it worked. The band was able to land several respectable gigs, but eventually broke up. David realized that there was another Davy Jones, and because he didn't want to be confused with this Davy Jones, he decided to reinvent himself. He looked into American history for inspiration. He came across a picture of Jim Bowie, and at the age of 18, David Bowie was born. In 1966, David released his first solo single called "Do Anything You Say." Even though it didn't hit the charts, it did get him his first manager, Ken Pitt, which if you don't know that name, that's okay. The only people that might really know that name are just like complete music nerds like me. Ken Pitt had managed people out of Britain, including, but not excluded to, Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, and Duke Ellington. At the same time of being signed by his first manager, David's brother Terry, remember we talked about him earlier, he was starting to show signs of schizophrenia. Mind you, Terry was only 29 years old, which late onset does usually happen around that time. Soon after, he was committed to an institution, and David feared that this disease would one day catch up to him too. Later that year, David released his first self-titled album, and unfortunately, the album did not do well at all. So because the album didn't do well, his manager convinced him to take up acting, and in 1967, he was able to land a role in this short film called The Image. So Bowie realized he actually loved acting and was like, I could do this, my friends. I can do this. Yes, I'm using eyelash glue right now, by the way, if you guys are wondering. This is like to help stick that eyebrow up. We want that eyebrow to go places. So Bowie realized that he loves acting. Yay. While working with Ken, Bowie met a woman named Hermione Farthingale, and they quickly fell in love. They began living together pretty soon after meeting, and in 1968, Hermione and a friend, John Hutchinson, formed a group which was called Feathers, which included music, dance, and poetry. The following year, the manager kind of put up his own money, created a short promotional film by showing his acting and singing talents, but unfortunately, Hermione broke up with Bowie during the production, and this left Bowie devastated and heartbroken. David had seen the 2001 Space Odyssey, which inspired him to create and record Space Oddity. The song was about an astronaut lost in space and was released in the July of 1969, days before Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. I look so angry, you guys. This should be an everyday look for me. I would never be approached by anyone. The song was really popular around Britain the week of the moon landing and was receiving a lot of recognition, but unfortunately the song got no airplay in the States and quickly slid off Britain's charts as this moon landing was kind of becoming old news. You know how it is. Things are great for like 2 seconds and then it slides off. So the same year that Space Oddity came out, Bowie decided, you know what, forget Hermione, I'm gonna find me a new woman. And that, oh no! Whatever, we'll fix it later. And that he did, my friends. He found a woman named Angie Barnett, and the two started dating. Angie, too, was a singer, and she wanted to help Bowie with his career. Angie was an extrovert American girl, and everything that she did was outrageous. The two enjoyed a non-traditional outlook on romance, where they had an open relationship. Hold on, I'm gonna fix this. So in 1969, the two traveled to Malta, and in Malta there was a singing competition. That is why they went. When they got there, the song When I Live My Dream was singled out as the best produced record. This was the first award Bowie had ever won, but days after winning, his biggest supporter, his father, died of pneumonia. David took all the responsibility from his mother and arranged the funeral and took care of his family the best to his ability during the sorrow. But I guess from reportings, he was truly a man during this sad time, and he did not show any emotion and just kind of handled everything. While dealing with the death of his father that same year, Space Oddity regained popularity and climbed to the British charts of number 5. So David tried to pounce on the opportunity since his song was doing so well and release a second album called Space Oddity, but that left in disappointment again and did not do very well at all. In 1969, Bowie and his girlfriend Angie decided that they were going to rent a 30-room mansion and invited all their friends to come live with them. Who can afford this 30-room mansion? Please tell me. Like, what else are y'all doing to be able to afford this? I want to know. Blend. You need to blend. This is looking good, right? Right. I know. I look really scary. It's fun. So in 1970s, it was kind of a tragic year for Britain, for all around the world, I guess, because the Beatles broke up, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin died of drug overdoses. It's just a weird time, you guys. Also, Lou Reed spares no feelings singing about his experience with drugs, which heavily influences Bowie's ideas of pushing the boundaries of music. At the same time, Bowie becomes heavily influenced by Iggy Pop and his avant-garde ways. Again, Bowie just loved the idea of pushing the boundaries of music. It was his jam. So we're still in that same year of 1970, and Bowie forms a new group called The Hype. He liked the idea of creating like an alter ego or a stage personality where he could kind of push the limits and maybe not necessarily take responsibility. Also, he felt like he was not a great performer. I guess he was very shy on stage. So he liked this idea of creating like this alter ego or almost like acting on stage, and he felt like it gave him more room to be creative. He spoke about performing in an interview stating, quote, "I was not a natural performer. I did not feel at ease on stage, but I felt really comfortable going on stage as someone else," end quote. So unconventional, David Bowie decided to do something that would shock everybody. He decided that he was going to marry Angie, but the terms of their relationship still stayed the same, and it was still an open relationship. Oh, so you guys thought that was a bold move for, him to get married? Especially for Bowie? You'll never believe the next move he made. He decided to end things with his manager and started working with a new manager named Tony DeFries. The same vision that Bowie had about psychedelic rock and felt like it was the future of music. And I am kind of glad that he decided to go with this gut instinct as far as going into more of that psychedelic rock, because he changed psychedelic rock for everybody in the game. Nobody knew psychedelic rock until Bowie came along. Also, one eye looks weird. It's fine. All right, I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. So at the same time of him trying to go into more psychedelic music, his wife, Angie, convinces him to do more of like a feminine approach. And again, she was extremely outrageous and basically told Bowie, like, this is okay, you can do this, you know. I'm not gonna think of you as less a man if you wear dresses. And she's the one that actually kind of convinced him of doing this. So he was more in the tabloids for kind of being more of a cross-dresser than he was for his actual music. In his next album, in The Man Who Sold the World, he was wearing a elegant dress, and this caught a lot of people's attention. Again, not necessarily for his music, but for the idea that a man was wearing a dress. Also, remember, this was a time when this was not okay. Homophobia was extremely big in the 70s and 80s. This was not okay. And artistic expression in this way it wasn't a thing yet. In 1971, Bowie makes another very conventional move by having a child with Angie. They had a little baby boy, and they named this little boy Zoe. Timing could not be any worse for this new father. As soon as his son was born, he was flown out to New York to sign a record deal with RCA, which was great for him and his career, but it kind of sucked for a new dad to be flown out basically right after your son was born and your career finally takes off and it's all you ever wanted. But I mean, I'm sure that was heartbreaking. Bowie's first album with the new record company was called Hunky Dory, featuring the song Changes. And soon after the album release, Bowie came out and officially declared that he was in fact gay. In 1972, the 25-year-old David Bowie decided that he was going to create a new persona, Ziggy Stardust. People loved the idea of a collage of people formed into this one person. You see, David Bowie had taken elements from Lindsay Kemp and Kabuki, and then a whole lot of David Bowie to create this persona of Ziggy Stardust. The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars was released on June 16th, 1972, and was the biggest hit of his career thus far. And it actually went gold soon after the release. This created a new era called glam rock. Bowie ventured to America for his first American tour, where Angie and Bowie started to drift due to Angie's struggles with the fame and chaos that Bowie was getting. David became broke amongst this tour, but spending did not stop, especially when it came to drugs. Tony, which was David's manager, if you remember, his kind of philosophy was, if you pretend like you got a lot of money and you spend money, you will give off the persona that you have a lot of money. Therefore, money will flow in. They spent a lot of David's money that was coming in, basically all of David's money that was coming in. And this was all of David's money. Tony wasn't using any of his money to do any of this. They were all living the high life on David's dime. Before David realized it, he was flat broke. But like I said, the spending did not stop. The drugs were Bowie's number one priority during this tour. It was also the 70s, mind you, where cocaine was treated as a good thing. It didn't come out yet that like cocaine was bad for you. It was a drug that everybody used. Due to Bowie's addiction issue that became so bad while doing his tour in the States, his weight loss became a real issue, as well as stress and frustrations, and he released the new album, Aladdin Sane. Aladdin Sane. I don't know. I like the play on words, Bowie. I'm really digging it. The album was a reflection of what he was going through at the time, and he went on a 100-day tour. On one of the first gigs, he actually collapsed on stage after performing Rock and Roll Suicide, which, I mean, could you think of any better song to collapse after? But, I mean, I know it's not a joking manner, Ashley. Stop it. When Bowie returned home, he learned that the album hit #1 on the charts, so that was pretty exciting, or so you would think. David struggled as he realized that his alter ego, Ziggy Stardust, was holding all the fame and not David Bowie. So on the last show of his tour, he made an announcement that shocked fans everywhere, stating, quote, "Not only is this the last show of the tour, but it is the last show we will ever do," end quote. As we already know, the self-retirement did not last long. In 1974, Bowie released the album Pin-Ups, a tribute to his favorite artist from the 1960s. He then released the album Diamond Dogs, which was an inspiration from the book 1984. Although Bowie was still married to Angie, he had started a serious relationship with a woman named Ava Cherry. He ended up moving in with in New York, which created a lot of issues between him and his wife. She became very jealous. From all the interviews that I had watched, it seemed that she was still kind of doing her own thing, still sleeping around with other people, having relationships with other people, but the fact that he was with another woman and it was kind of serious really bugged her. Oh, the 70s. For his next tour, David wanted a full production and sought after Toni Basil to do his productions and choreography, which at the time she was like a famous choreographer who had done a lot of stuff for Broadway and a lot of musical numbers. She was kind of famous in the choreography world. In an interview, she had stated that when she was being wooed, there was a lot of money being thrown around at her in order to choreograph Bowie's production. A lot of money was spent on this production as a whole. It was larger than any audience has ever seen. I mean, this was David Bowie to level 1,000. Bowie was very happy with the production, but unfortunately, Tony DeFries cancels the rest of the tour as he sees how much money is actually being spent on this production and shows David Bowie how much money he truly has versus how much money needs to be paid back to RCA. So Bowie is completely shocked to find out that he's actually broke, and Bowie had always thought he was partners in this management company that DeFries had built using Bowie as the face of his company, as his star pupil. And DeFries tells him that Bowie had no ownership nor rights, but would not be making any money from the company. So basically DeFries used his name, used his image, and built a whole company. You know, Bowie had like done speeches and trying to build this management company, trying to build this management company for DeFries, only to find out that he has no management rights, no ownership rights, nothing. And DeFries basically cut him out from any money-making opportunities from the management company itself. So Bowie sees his finances and realizes, okay, I need to scale back on productions, and he does, but he doesn't scale back on his cocaine usage, which puts his finances in a really crippling situation. He then released Young Americans by soul-searching back to his childhood days when he had a passion and love for the rhythm and blues. He called his new genre plastic soul. So basically just kind of calling himself out for being white, but loving this soul music. A lot of people commended him for this, trying to break the boundaries of a racial divide in music. Later that year, Bowie did a collaboration with John Lennon and Carlos Alomar, which he wrote about DeFries and the deceptions of feeling famous and acting famous, but really having no money. That was David's first #1 hit on the American charts, as we now know as the song Fame. John Lennon learned of the issues between DeFries and Bowie, and John Lennon kind of helped him as a friend, gave him all this legal advice to help him. And soon after, Bowie took legal action against Tony to terminate their contract. In 1976, Bowie releases his next album. This album was called Station to Station. Again, Bowie reinvents himself as this very clean, chiseled man. It puts him back on financial stability, and he moved his family to Switzerland where his money would be safe from American taxes. Although Bowie had provided for Angie, he and Angie were no longer together and no longer a couple. Since they were no longer a couple, Bowie decided that he was going to move to Berlin and try to kick his cocaine addiction and get 100% sober. While in Berlin, he downsized to a tiny apartment and decided he was going to live a very minimalistic lifestyle, and he wrote Iggy Pop's next album, The Idiot. With drugs becoming a pop culture norm, Bowie struggled staying sober, but was ready for a new art form and an unconventional style of music. Bowie releases the album Low in 1977, bringing a haunted-like sound into pop music. The album did not do well, but instead of reinventing himself again, he stuck with it and created 2 more LPs based on that same style and vibe, trying to make a change in pop music, which Heroes actually became a huge hit. In December of 1977, Bowie surprised all of his fans in the world, actually, by guest starring on Bing Crosby's Merry Old Christmas, which was very unlike Bowie's style. See, Bing Crosby's show was very conservative, and Bowie was anything but conservative. Angie was very unhappy with Bowie and her family life and tried to commit suicide but failed. And Bowie grew extremely concerned with Angie's mental health as well as Bowie's son and felt like he could not have Angie raising their child any longer. Bowie filed for divorce and won sole custody of Zoe, but at this time, Zoe decided to reinvent himself as well, and he now wanted to be called Joey. Before the divorce, because the divorce did take a few years to happen and he did not have sole custody yet, in 1978, Bowie moves to LA where his cocaine addiction tips him over the edge, where he woke up in a gutter and decided to take a break from music and pick back up on his acting career. During the movie, the director made it very clear that drugs were not tolerated. The movie was not a big success, but Bowie earned a lot of respect for his acting and performance. In 1980, that is when the divorce is finalized and Bowie gets full custody of Joey. Once Bowie had full custody of his son, he decided that drugs were no longer to be a part of his life and got 100% clean to be the best dad he possibly could. In 1980, David picked up him and his son and moved to New York, where he debuted his first Broadway musical, The Elephant Man. The work was absolutely captivating, and critics gave Bowie outstanding reviews for his performance. During The Elephant Man, Bowie releases his 7th studio album, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. David's good friend John Lennon is shot and killed. This devastates David. As soon as the play was over, he packed his bags and moved back to Berlin to mourn the loss of his best friend. In 1982, Bowie goes back to acting and playing a vampire in the movie The Hunger. But before the movie releases, David learns that his brother tried to jump from a window of the institution that he was at in attempts of suicide. The attempt was unsuccessful, but Bowie returned home to make sure that his brother was okay. He did not speak to friends or anyone about these issues of his brother's mental health. Again, this was kind of a family secret and that was ingrained in his brain, so he never learned how to talk about it with people and he internalized all these feelings. The next year, Bowie plays in a war drama called Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. After fulfilling his acting needs, David goes back to music and decides to actually go mainstream, which is something that David had never done before. In 1983, Bowie signs with EMI Records and does a few music videos with the recording company, including the song Let's Dance, which had a lot of heavy play on MTV. The album went platinum 8 weeks after being released, which led to another world tour. In 1984, Bowie announced with his new mainstream look that he is also exclusively heterosexual. In late 1984, Bowie releases the album Tonight, which is the breaking point of writing for the people and not necessarily from his heart anymore. In 1985, Terry commits suicide, leaving Bowie filled with grief and heartbreak. As you recall, Terry was kind of Bowie's knight in shining armor. He always looked up to Terry, and now he's gone. And again, he's internalizing all these feelings and not talking about it. Later that year, he puts his heartbreak aside and performed at the Live Aid in London to help feed starving children in Africa. In 1986, David Bowie stars in Labyrinth, a musical fantasy film which had mixed critical responses, but gained a very large following. That is the inspired look of today, by the way, per request of my cousin. I don't know, how did I do, Becca? Back to David Bowie. Bowie and Mick Jagger release the song Dancing in the Street, where all proceeds went to charity. The song hit #1 in the UK and #7 in the US charts. In 1987, Bowie releases Never Let Me Down and realizes that he is done with mainstream. In 1988, David releases Tin Machine, which he yet again reinvents rock and roll. This was a stepping stone, what is now known as alternative rock. David finally finds fulfillment in music again. He decides he wants the same fulfillment in his personal life. I kind of look like a weird version of the Joker right now. In 1990, David meets model Iman, and he says it's love at first sight. Isn't that cute, you guys? After 6 months of being together, the couple quickly fall in love and are engaged to be married. The couple married in 1992, where his now 20-year-old son was his best man. His marriage inspired his next album, which was called Black Tie, White Noise, where he finally stops repressing about his brother's mental health and really faces them with the song called Jump. In 1984, Bowie decides he is now also going to take over the fine arts with his paintings. I saw a lot of his paintings online and they were actually really good. I was quite shocked, I'm not gonna lie. This man's good at everything, I swear. So his paintings were shared with the world and was actually highly regarded as an editorial modernist in the magazine Modern Painters. That's really all you hear about his paintings, because then he goes back to music. Bowie releases Outside as a concept album about art and murder, which was his 19th studio album. He has Trent Reznor from 9 Inch Nails to join him on tour, and Trent speaks about the collab, stating, quote, Bowie didn't expect the album to sell well, and Bowie said if we tour together that his band will probably get booed off stage because of what he is trying to do, but that doesn't matter. It's about, I have to do this. That fearlessness is really inspiring to be around, end quote. The album was not a commercial success as expected. Bowie's 20th studio album was Earthly and was released with the UK hit Little Wonder. In 1996, Bowie was finally induced into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At the age of 53, I did not stutter. Remember this number, 53. David Bowie becomes a father yet again to a little girl named Alexandria, but he still remained very close to his son. It seemed he had it all, and he owed it all to his sobriety. Bowie spoke about his relationships, stating, quote, my relationships with my friends, my family, everybody around me are so good and happy for so many years now. I would never do anything to destroy that ever again, end quote. In 2002, Bowie releases his next album, Heathen, under a new contract with Columbian Records, as well as The Best of Bowie. In 2003, Bowie releases Reality, which accompanied another world tour. In 2004, Bowie suffers from a heart attack, which forces him to cancel the rest of his tour. Due to this heart attack, Bowie scales back on interviews and his music career as a whole, and kind of just becomes a family man for a little while. In 2006, Bowie is awarded for the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award and announces, quote, I'm taking a year off, no touring, no albums, end quote. So no one hears of Bowie until 2013, where he releases The Next Day. That same year, Bowie also writes the musical Lazarus, which was a lifelong dream for David Bowie. You see, as a young teenager, he wanted to write musicals. He didn't actually want to be a singer, songwriter, artist. He wanted to write musicals. So his dream came true when he did that later in life. Also, nobody knew this, but for 18 months, David had been quietly battling liver cancer. On January 8th, 2016, Bowie releases the album Black Star. The album got great reviews, and it seemed like everybody was so happy that David Bowie was back. But unfortunately, David Bowie died 2 days after the album release. I know this was a really long video, guys, and I was only able to touch on very little of David Bowie's life, and I apologize for that. But man, he was such an interesting man and such an interesting artist. Also, on another note, I really wish I had like a blonde mullet wig, but I don't. So this is gonna have to do. Just decided to like tease my hair like crazy. I feel like I kind of look like a weird version of like Elvira, like not a cute one. This is my look, my David Bowie look for the day. I really loved doing this. I loved researching it. So thank you to my cousin for getting me to research him because I learned so much about this artist. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to my same cousin, Becca. She made this amazing shirt for me and I really love it. I keep trying to convince her to open up a shop and do this, like an online Etsy shop or something. So y'all go hype her, please, because she needs to do this. These are beautiful. I mean, look at how pretty this is. It's so cute. I mean, the colors are amazing. If there's any other artists that you guys would like me to do, please let me know. Also, just a couple of quick announcements. I do have a TikTok now, so if you guys like the content I'm putting out here, please go follow me on that. I feel like you guys would really enjoy that. I do makeup tutorials all the time. I try to upload every day. Y'all are not following me yet? I mean, come on, do it now. Also, last week I kind of took the weekend off because it was Labor Day weekend, so I apologize for that. And I've got a lot going on in my life and I just needed a weekend off. Other than that, I've got nothing else for you guys. You know, have a good week, find some inspiration in your life, and have a good day. Bye.